But as Charles says in his column about how the Biden White House and the Biden campaign should handle all of this, it's not like we're talking about personal scandal with Donald Trump and it's too tawdry and we're just going to talk about the economy. As Charles writes, we're talking about the foundations of our democracy, that this man who led an attempted coup against the government, this man who took classified documents about military secrets back to his beach club with him, this is bedrock stuff that at some point Joe Biden and his campaign will have to confront.
Well, I think Charles is absolutely right. The campaign ought to be confronting this already, and you know, the way you get a message across is you say it over and over again, and sometimes you say it in a loud voice, and it's certainly time for that. Not just to begin, but to, you know, it should have been going on for a while. Now, there is a problem for President Biden himself. It is a problem for a sitting president to sort of weigh in and opine on an ongoing criminal case. So that's understandable, and I think that's proper. You know, I use the word proper as if we're in an age of propriety, but and we're not, but in fact, that is the right thing to do. But his campaign surrogates, his campaign media certainly should be pointing out that this is a probably soon to be convicted felon. He's up on what is it, 90 separate federal felony counts in all these various cases, and there's a reason for all of that. The reason is this rampant criminality that we've seen from Donald Trump, and so yeah, that ought to be a central theme of the campaign. Cracking that alternate information world is one of the great problems for our democracy to try to solve, and we haven't figured out how to solve it yet.
Yeah, that's definitely for sure the disinformation out there. But Jonathan Lemire, it also may be that the campaign is holding their powder and just waiting to see. I mean, there are, six different legal cases rolling toward closing in on this former president. And, you know, as days go by, the former president gets bad news on many of these. I mean, there are so many counts against him. The possibility that he's innocent of all of them. I mean, I've even seen hosts on Fox News go, really? Like, he's not guilty on all of this? So I think there is a strategy to waiting a little bit to see what happens and let the law play out. Yeah, those in the White House and closest to President Biden's reelection effort, they leave the door open to changing tactics down the road. They say the president himself, they say, will not speak about the legal issues. He'll talk in loftier terms. They're planning another speech about threats to democracy that he'll give in the coming weeks. But he'll stay out of the particulars of the cases. They do think that some Democrats will be empowered to do so later this year, early next. But there are others in the party who think, to Charles's point, that might be too late, that elections are often won in the off season and the year before as you start to define your opponent. Now, we all know, everyone knows Donald Trump. Right. There is a lot of finger pointing and some concern here as to what to do. So, Charles, but part of the White House's theory of the case is that they don't have to do it because others will. And they think in particular that next year, when these cases actually go to trial and there is nonstop news coverage of Donald Trump in a courtroom, and even if it's just the one, a federal election interference case in D.C., the one that seems to be built to move the quickest, they think that will drive home the point to suburban voters, to independent voters. Look, we can't go down this path again. We can't elect this man again. What do you think? Is that enough, or is that not aggressive enough?
Well, I want you to think about what we've just said, what you've just said, what Eugene just said. Like, the president can't engage because it's an active investigation. At what point does the person who is literally running on a platform of defending and protecting democracy, not engage on the biggest threat to that democracy? It is likely that there will be litigation all the way through the election. Are we saying that the president of the United States, who is running against the guy who is the greatest threat to democracy, will not be able to engage on the issue, on the fact that this person he's running against, if he ends up being the Republican nominee, he cannot say that this person is indicted on all of these counts, that it seems insane to me. I think we're living or trying to operate as if things are normal when they are absolutely not normal. And the former president has signaled in every possible way that if he ever gets back to the White House, he will break the norms completely. He has said that he would like to suspend parts of the Constitution. Conservative groups like the Heritage Foundation are leading a charge to draw up plans right now that would make it possible for Donald Trump on day one to start to dismantle the federal government. I don't understand what we're saying here. I don't understand what we're saying, like that we're holding the powder dry, that we are that there's another time that we're going to be able to do this, that there's a season that's going to come that's close to Election Day when all of this will change, all of our strategies will change, the surrogates will step in and do the work that the president can't do. It seems crazy to me on some level to think that there's time to get this right.
Yeah, you know, everything that Charles just said, let me just say amen. Because, Maura, if I am running for office and I'm running against a guy who has stolen nuclear secrets, I'm going to, hi, my opponent stole nuclear secrets. I'm Joe Scarborough, great to talk to you. My opponent stole war plans with Iran, showed them to his political director, and then told her, I'm not supposed to show this to you. I could declassify it if I were still president of the United States, but I'm not, so I can't declassify it. I would then say he also called the Secretary of State of Georgia a Trumper, a guy who voted for Donald Trump, and said, steal the election for me. It's on tape. I mean, listen, these are not normal times. And Joe Biden doesn't have to say, I've been talking to the Justice Department. He can say, listen, I'm not communicating with them. They do their thing. I do my thing. But I can read the newspapers. I can watch TV. And I can tell you, the guy I'm running against said that when he gets elected, he's going to tear down the federal government, just like they promised to do last time. He said he's going to arrest people. He said he's going to suspend the Constitution. He's already stolen nuclear secrets. Let's see. What else do you want to know about my opponent? I mean, I do agree with Charles. How do you run against a guy that stole nuclear secrets and not say to people you're campaigning against, here's your choice, me or the guy that stole nuclear secrets, the guy who said the second he becomes president, he's going to start arresting people, and that guy right there who also said that he'd terminate the Constitution. How do you not say that? We are not playing by Marcus of Queensberry rules anymore when we're fighting for the very survival of American democracy, are we?
I mean, it's like bringing a bottle of wine to a gunfight. And I think there's just an element here of what Charles is saying is you have to stand up to a bully. You have to stand up to a bully. And Donald Trump is essentially, I believe, depending on Democrats, on the president, acting like this is just business as usual. And so the silence speaks volumes. The silence becomes the elephant in the room. Well, it's actually not accomplishing what I think the president and the Democrats need it to accomplish. And also, I feel as somebody who's written about politics for many years now, that if you don't tell your own story, you allow someone else to tell it for you. So why you would allow your opponent to define the issues and the story in this race is I just think it's malpractice politically. I certainly understand the president's reluctance to speak on an ongoing criminal investigation. But as you said, Joe, nobody is asking him to weigh in on updates from the Justice Department.
Right. Yeah. I'll tell you what it reminds me of. Barnacle reminds me of Mike Dukakis. George Bush running around Boston Harbor saying it's polluted. Mike Dukakis, I'm not going to respond. And he pushes his lawnmower, which is not an electric, not a gas-powered lawnmower. It's one of those just like whatever lawnmower across the lawn, just being a regular guy. And he goes like this, boop, in the polls. The next day, Bush goes to a flag factory, Dukakis. I'm not going to answer it. Pushes his lawnmower, boop. Polls go down even more. The next day, like Bush, like they tear him to shreds. He's saying, I'm not going to respond. I'm not going to do it. And of course, we know Bernard Shaw asks the question in the debate. It's like,
Okay.
I'm not going to respond. You got to respond. Listen, I always told my family that, like my mom, Joey, why are they so mean to you when you're running for office? I go, Ma, if you want me to be an insurance defense lawyer, I can be an insurance defense lawyer, right? I can work for Geico. I can work for State Farm. I can, they'll bill out at $75 an hour for the firm. I can do that. But if I step into the ring, they're going to try to knock my head off. And you can't take that personally because I'm in the ring. And it's my job to not get my head knocked off. So they're in the arena. Biden is in the arena. And Mike, this is not about Joe Biden just standing up to a bully. This is about Joe Biden standing up for American democracy. It's time to fight, it's time to engage, and it's time to tell the truth about this guy stealing nuclear secrets, trying to steal the election, saying he's going to terminate the Constitution, and saying that the second he gets elected, he's going to take over the FCC to take TV shows off that he doesn't like, and to start arresting people. It's like he's got to engage.